Taran Tactical is known for customizing other people's guns and elevating their performance. Now, Taran worked with Canik to have his specification included at the factory with the Canik TTI Combat. But the one thing that he did leave out was a heavy price tag. Welcome back to the Humble Marksman channel. I'm David and this is the Canik TTI Combat. Now this is a full-size 9mm pistol with a heavily textured frame, which is awesome. A nice texture on the slide and a compensator straight from the factory. But it's not a traditional compensator design. We'll dive deeper in that. And there's some other questions I have, like how does it shoot next to the poly rival or potentially even the steel frame rival? So we'll get all that answered with some nice out of focus slow motion video. But first I need to give a shout out to all of the dads in the audience. I think you know by now you have the most important job in the world, and I hope you're taking that as seriously as you can. But to help you in that, I give you this. Why did the hipster always burn his tongue on coffee? He drank it before it was cool. So we're gonna dive in and talk about this gun, specifically the compensator, because this is interesting. But first, I need to talk to my YouTube manual reviewer. Guys, this is a gun directly from the factory, and in full disclosure, it was a T&E gun provided by Canik USA for review, but this is just a review. I have no financial relationship with them, blah, blah, blah. But everything you see on this gun, excepting the optic, which is allowed by your rules, is as it comes straight from the factory. You, dear viewer, if you think you're subscribed to the channel, please just go ahead and validate that. They've been unsubscribing people recently, and if you're curious about this gun, maybe consider subscribing. I'll be doing a head-to-head with this gun, the Shadow Systems MR920P and the Bull Armory Tomahawk Pro in the weeks to come, and you won't want to miss that. So while our minds immediately go to the rival with this gun, and as they should based on the trigger that is provided with the gun is actually closer in length to the Mete series of pistols, and the optic cut, which is different on this gun, is more similar to the Mete style of optic than it was the rival style of optic. And that's where I want to start with the gun, talking about kind of the slide and how it is different. As you notice, there is a rear sight present. So in theory, you can co-witness sights with this gun. However, the optic plate system is totally different. You may notice the optic plate is a very little skinny thing. It's not nearly as thick as the OEM Canik plates on the rival, and it's not the traditional screw the optic into the plate, screw the plate into the slide. It's actually just a spacer that provides recoil lugs, and the plate has a male-female relationship with the slide. Now, I didn't realize that plates were included. I just thought it direct mounted the optic, and you can actually do that too if you don't mind losing the recoil lugs. When I first got the gun, I took it out with the M03 directly mounted onto the slide, and the co-witness sights actually come through the window of the optic on this big Canik M03 sight, which is a huge competition window sight for not a ton of money. It's like a $250 sight that gets you a 6 MOA dot, so that's pretty awesome. The slide has one of my favorite colors, this kind of burnt bronze sort of color. It's got plenty of speed holes so you can look fast when the gun isn't moving, and a short bit of reciprocating mass, so the slide actually is pretty short, so the slide moves a little bit more lively than kind of the heavier, longer slides that are on like the rival 5-inch guns. The serrations on the front of the gun are exceptionally usable. They're in the same ballpark as the rival, but they are a bit of a different design. Moving down onto the grip is where they've added a kind of heavy fissure texture. Now the texture that came on the poly rivals is kind of like a fine fissure texture. Didn't really do a great job of providing bite on your hand, and the back strap kind of has these little nubbies, whereas there is just an absolutely aggressive backstrap that keeps the gun absolutely planted in your hand. Now, some of you people will probably complain about how heavy the texture is, and I would say that that's your invitation to go dry fire practice and train and develop calluses on your hands, because the gun absolutely allows your support hand to get in on recoil management in a way that it doesn't on the old polymer frames. I hope that Canik puts this texture on all of their polymer frames on the go forward, except maybe their little baby concealed carry guns. And the reason why the texture is important is your support hand is better able to absorb more recoil coming off the gun and send that into your body before the slide bottoms out and lifts. So that's why you want heavy texture on a performance shooting gun, and I would say that this gun falls into that category. And the heavy texture is wrapped around onto the front of the gun as well, so your hand is just totally locked in from a strong hand perspective. The trigger is exactly like what you're used to on the other rival guns. The trigger pull weight on this particular gun came in at just north of about 4 pounds 1 ounce on my Lyman digital trigger scale, and you can kind of see that when you pull the trigger, it kind of sits right at about 90 degrees, then breaks right at 90 degrees. So if you're into those style of triggers, that is going to be for you. Just like the steel frame gun, the TTI Combat comes in a cool Pelican style case with all the accessories that you'd expect. Comes with one 18-round magazine and one 21-round magazine. Both of the base plates are said to be TTI base plates. They do have the logo on them, but they look very, very similar to the old Canik base plates with a new design on the 21 rounder. The holster that is provided in the kit is actually pretty decent. It's much better than the rival holsters, which bound on the slide serrations on the gun. The gun just flies out of this holster. It is quite lovely. All right, before we start to get into the shooting, we talked about the compensator. This is a new design of compensator that I have not encountered before. It is not like a traditional compensator where the barrel ends, the expansion chamber begins, so the gas comes out of the barrel, expands in the expansion chamber, hits the vertical surface, and is redirected up. This actually, you can see that the barrel is flush with the end of the compensator. There's a slot cut across the top of the barrel like a port, and then that gas hits the vertical surface of this kind of steel compensator and redirects the gas up. And it is a quick detach. You can see kind of this little button right here at the front. So the way you take it off, I'm not going to do it on camera because YouTube is likely to freak out, but you press the button with kind of your punch, and then it's just a like 3/4 rotation to pull the comp off. It's very easy to get on and off. And according to Canik, it's not a threaded barrel. So in theory, that makes it 50 state legal. I'm not a lawyer, and I don't know what the definition of threaded barrel means. Real quickly, I do want to talk about the Canik M03 that I had on the site. The window on this sucker is bigger than an SRO. Now, it doesn't have a spherical lens glass, but it is a very clear glass. It is about what you have seen on other stuff like the SR with a slight fisheye distortion. Brightness on the dot is plenty bright on the outdoor shooting that we were doing. But also I do want to show you this kind of new design on backup iron sights, where this is Patnik Solutions. They're making plates for Caniks and I think even Sig Sauer guns now, where there's just this one like plate at the back of the optic, and it kind of creates this sort of snowman picture that co-witnesses with the front sight. So I thought that was pretty cool. I just wanted to share it with you guys. So now, I'm not an engineer and I don't speak fluid dynamics. We're talking about the compensator. Now, I can tell you that this gun requires different springing than the other guns. You'll see it in the slow motion footage, but it comes with 2 recoil springs, one for ammo that's over 1050 foot per second and one for ammo that's under 1050 foot per second. I filmed the outdoor portion of this video at the range after a match I shot last weekend, and a buddy had some of his 147 grain ammo that is, you know, sub 900 feet per second. It made this gun go bolt action. We swapped the recoil spring and it ran like a top, so there's that. As far as the ammo that I shot with the gun, I shot both 115 grain S&B as well as AAC 124s, and the gun was happy with all that and ran it all day long on the full power recoil spring. So shooting the gun is lively as you'd imagine a lightweight gun to be, but the recoil is not heavy. Now, it is a Canik, and if you're familiar with Canik guns, you know that they like to try and rotate just simply based on kind of the taller slide design that they implement, similar to the old Walter guns. But the dot lift is not very high. With a big window dot like this M03, the dot doesn't leave the window if you have a good competent grip, and that was what I was enjoying with this gun. The return to zero makes shooting the gun feel very quick and very lively, but you know, doesn't dump a bunch of energy in your arm. So not a very fatiguing gun to shoot, is very lightweight. The heavier texture on the gun does help you combat the rotation. It keeps the gun absolutely planted. As a result of that nice 4-pound trigger and Canik's, you know, awesome barrels that they put in these guns, I was able to get some really good accuracy out of the gun. All right, from 25 yards, looks like that's a pretty good group. S&B 115. Me not doing a good job pulling the trigger, but otherwise pretty good. I took it to an IDPA match, which this gun would be legal for carry optics in IDPA, and shot it there. And I was happy to report that these slide serrations were very, very functional. I think I had 3 unloaded starts in the match. The magwell does exactly what it's supposed to, making reloads very, very easy. The match challenged us with a 19-yard target. We had to shoot 3 times, and I shot like a sub 3-inch group on the clock at 20 yards in the middle of the target, so that was all to the good. The speed holes, like, they looked cool while I was at the match. Look at those speed holes. Awesome. And it's technically not the gun, it's the holster, but the holster did a great job as well. I was very pleased with the holster, which the one for the rival wasn't a huge fan of, but this one is pretty good. So all in all, I think I got about 400 rounds through the gun before filming this review, and I've had 0 malfunctions, except for my buddy's 147 grain that stopped malfunctioning when we used the proper recoil spring. So how does it shoot next to the polymer rival or the big fat steel frame rival? Now, this is a steel frame rival with these brass grips on it, so it's a very, very heavy gun. And if you'd like brass grips, you can save 10% with code HUMBLE at LOK Grips. Now, if you see my other videos on compensators, a compensator will generally remove about 20 to 30% of the muzzle climb associated with the recoil of the gun. And I would say that with the polymer rival, that was absolutely the case. The gun just lifted higher than this gun did. It felt like I had to put more effort into returning the gun to 0. Moving on to the Porky steel frame gun. The steel frame gun was a faster recoil impulse because this, I believe, has a higher spring rate from the factory. But a heavyweight gun, I mean, this gun weighs probably nearly twice as much as what this gun does. The steel frame gun just is more gentle feeling to shoot. It's not as athletic despite having a faster slide speed technically. But don't just take my word for it. After the match, I had 2 shooting buddies who shoot rival steel frames shoot this gun, and the guy thought that the gun was gentler shooting than his steel frame. And the female shooter said that she really liked this to the point where she was already looking on her phone to see if she could go buy one. Personally, where I land on it, I do like the heft of a heavyweight gun. So kind of the best of all worlds to me would be able to get this kind of upper on a heavier frame so the gun was heavier. But there are options you can make this gun heavier with the brass backstrap and brass magwell that like LOK Grip makes. So the Canik TTI Combat is a really cool gun. It's got the great bronze color slide. It's got a really cool price tag that your wife probably won't yell at you for. The heavy texture on the frame really does keep the gun planted and makes it a performance shooting machine. So Taran and Canik did a great job with the pistol. Now, if you're curious about the compensator and how to get the most out of it with your ammo selection, I put this video together that you should check out that goes through a bunch of different compensator designs and the effect that the ammo has on that comp. So you might check that one out now.